We are here to talk about something very serious, comedy. So it's serious business.
Very serious.
Yeah, very, very serious. It's awesome to be in Tryon, North Carolina. I got to tell you, I'm a huge Nina Simone fan, so it's nice to be in her birthplace.
Yes, hi, I'm Julia, and I'm originally from the upstate of South Carolina. I spent local yokel here. I spent the last 30 years in New York City and Los Angeles working in comedy. And I have recently moved back to South Carolina, and I am just thrilled to be back home. And I'm thrilled to be amongst locals who are also creatives in the industry. Really feels good to be here, so thank you so much for having us. Sam has worked, in film and TV for a long time.
Allegedly. Yeah, I'm a lifer, producer. I can't sing, dance, or act. So I work best when I'm with talented people and around talented people. So I am, as you heard, a 2-time Emmy nominee, but those things are the results of a career. And I've had the pleasure of working in film and television and other mediums for 30 years, working with some terrific, amazing creatives. Have spent most of my life developing, selling, and making comedy, although the irony is I oddly am known for a very serious thing, or at least an intellectual thing. But it's great. It's great to be here to talk about comedy. Julia, to just say a few of her bona fides, I've watched Julia perform on Broadway stages, perform at the Hollywood Bowl, in musical theater comedy, write in the Netflix writer's room of a comedy. She was on Modern Family, just directed a comedy feature here in the upstate. So a really multifaceted and multi-talented person, but comedy has always been the North Star.
Yeah, for sure. I would say that I've been doing comedy since I was about 3 years old. So I started writing little comedic monologues that I would do for talent shows and perform at the nursing homes, things like that. That's where my stand-up, my childhood stand-up career began. But I've had a very unique, sort of trajectory in the business. I grew up here. There wasn't a lot, offered education-wise for me in film and TV at the time. I graduated from the University of South Carolina with a theater degree, and I wanted to do Broadway. So that's what I did first. I worked on Broadway in national tours as a performer in musical theater. I learned a lot about comedy, performing live musical theater at that level. Then that led to us moving to Los Angeles, and I transitioned to film and TV as an actor and worked a lot in film and TV in comedy. The very first thing I booked in LA was a sitcom. And realized quickly, this is sort of like musical theater. I got it. It's live audience, So I was like, this is good for me. Then I began working in different genres there. I ended up trying my hand at writing. I'm sure some of you are writers, some of you are actors, different directors, producers. So I'm just trying to talk broadly. But I ended up selling. I decided to write a feature, try my hand at writing. And lo and behold, the first comedic feature I wrote, I sold to New Line Cinema. That was a crash course in developing comedy with a major studio, with major directors. It was like a 2-year process, and then they ultimately didn't make the movie, which was super disappointing, but boy, did I learn a lot, right? And that really propelled me into the YouTube channel that I started. I really started the YouTube channel because I was irritated at Hollywood, to be honest with you. The marketing department of that movie decided not to make it because they said it was too Southern. I was like, what? There's no such thing as too Southern. What's wrong with you people? So I started a YouTube channel and just made one video in 2012. And the video was just supposed to be for fun. And I pulled a bunch of my Southern films together and said, let's just make a video. And I hopped on a meme. There was a meme that was very popular at the time. So it wasn't like I had some unique creative idea. I hopped on a meme. And I thought it would be one thing. It turned out to be the thing that really opened a lot of doors for me. And because that video went viral. And I've kept making videos. I'm not a full-time digital person, but I've had a lot of experience in that digital world, and I know that world. If any of you have questions about that world and are interested, that is not where I make my primary living. I use my YouTube channel as a creative playground and to build my brand. And to build my voice. When I am up for jobs, whether it's features or on a staff or whatever, it's helpful to have something else, you know what I mean? To say, oh, but in addition to my specs, go look at this, you know? It's nice to have a little test ground. You've got an audience. So, you know, it's sort of a little focus group for your voice, your brand. That led to me writing books. I've written books. I've written on staff of multicam at Netflix. I've written features. I've adapted screenplays for hire. I'm in the Writers Guild. And I just directed a feature here with an association with Clemson University. So I'm all over the place. You know what I mean? I really kind of am all over the place. And I encourage you to be all over the place, because I think that every aspect of the industry that I work in, I bring something to the table that maybe somebody else doesn't, because I have been in so many different roles. And it really helps me. It helps me tackle problems in a different way.
One thing that I've seen, though, I will say, because I get the pleasure of watching Julia's career unfold while dabbling in the zillion weird little things I try to do, is that when Julia was performing on Broadway, when we first met, she was, I mean, everybody in that cast was brilliant. Bernadette Peters, Tom, it was great. But Julia was working very hard at that time, I recall, to kind of be in this Broadway lane that encouraged sort of being, kind of feeling like you were a New Yorker more than you were maybe Southern. And it was when this YouTube channel happened and Julie had written this film and fully embraced her authentic voice, her authentic identity, that her career took off. And it was really, I mean, amazing to see that happen in real time.
It's true, and that really leads us. It was funny, last week I said to Sam, wait, what are we talking about? What are we talking about at the Triumph Fest? He's like, we're talking about the creative, aspects of comedy. I was like, that's too broad. How am I supposed to do that in 50 minutes? But I started thinking about how could I sort of distill down approaching comedy in a finite situation here with you. And I started thinking about, really, there's, I think, 3 major points. Number one is know your voice, right? You have to know your comedic voice. Yes, Sam is correct. When you go to any theater school, the first thing they do is drill that Southern accent out of your mouth, right? Yeah. And they make you feel really bad that you have it. Like there's something wrong with you, right? And so here I am in New York City, and I'm learning to shape my vowels and do the songs and never ever sound like I'm from South Carolina. And lo and behold, what's my big break? I get cast in Annie Get Your Gun. And you know why I got cast? Because I had a Southern accent and I could understudy all the roles, and I was funny delivering it because I wasn't putting on a Southern accent. It's who I was, right? And all of a sudden I went, well, ding, ding, ding. Why am I spending all my time and energy hiding my Southern accent when maybe that's my greatest gift, right? And so that was eye-opening for me. And that's what I mean by know your voice. You don't have to have a Southern voice. We happen to be here in North Carolina today. But whatever your voice is, that's your brand. And once you realize what your voice is, I highly suggest refining it, right? So if you're a digital creator, whether you are a filmmaker, whether you are a television writer or aspiring to be a television writer who is writing specs, or writing feature specs, whatever it is you're doing, make a couple of things in the same voice. I'm sure Sam would love to speak to that.
Well, yeah,
industry-wise.
Yeah, as a producer, we talk about where to find these kinds of voices and how to cultivate talent or work with talent that are going to bring something to the table that frankly will be successful. One of the first agents I worked with said, look, it's not a complicated business. If you make something for $1 and it makes 99 cents, you failed. And if it makes $1 and a penny, you won. You did it. And so you have to turn a profit with things on a certain level. That I found also comes from working with authentic voices and working with people in the lane that they excel in. So if I wanted to do something that maybe was a 1-hour drama, politically motivated, sure, there are a lot of writers out there, but I'd want to find Aaron Sorkin or somebody like Aaron Sorkin. He's built that lane. We know that voice. I work with Julia. When I do, I know what I'm going to get. I don't necessarily know exactly how it's going to look or feel. It might be a TV show, it might be a movie, but I know the lane it's going to be in. I know the general voice. And it's really important that you, as creators, right, help people like me help you get your work done. And if you're every kind of thing in the world, I don't really know what to do. Maybe we can find something, or maybe I'll have an idea. But if you come and you're like, I am in this lane, I'm a Southern comedian, I have this voice, I have this track record, everything I've touched kind of feels this way, I then know, okay, this is what's going to be right then, and we can partner for success.
Exactly. And then it helps your agents or managers, it helps them know what to do for you and helps them know where to pitch you for jobs. I will assure you that my agent is not pitching me to write on NCIS. You know what I'm saying? Unless it's a Southern version of NCIS, They are pitching me for the Leanne Morgan show, for, I'm interviewing for these kind of jobs, usually all the way up to the top. And I may or may not get them. But when, for example, I recently adapted a novel, right? And I was hired to do that. It was a drama, which is not normally my fare, but it was a Southern drama. And then I found a way to infuse comedy into that Southern drama adaptation as a sort of tension relief, right? But I have a voice. I live in a lane, and I just stay true to that lane. Does that mean that I'm not capable of doing other things? Of course I can do other things. But I have made a business decision to know my voice, to hone my voice, and to stay true to my voice. And whatever your voice is, I think that's solid advice.
Without question. And one of the things I think that we wanted to touch on today, right? We all want to create, we all want to do, and as Julia said, create, do, make. As a producer, I just make stuff, right? It's turned into a life and a career, but it's about making things. But we do bring a perspective of working professionally. And this is how we put food on the table. So we can talk about, and we'll talk about the creative process, but from my point of view, I try to note that what we're talking about is how to work professionally. And we all aspire to work professionally. We all want to have investors invest in our work. We want studios to buy our work. We want directors to cast us in things if you're on that side of the camera. And these are things you can do to increase the probabilities of your success. If you're doing things in 500 lanes, especially when you're starting out, it can be very difficult for people to understand, frankly, how to even invest in you. Whether that investment is money, time, energy, relationships, whatever those investments are. But if you're clear and you do cultivate your voice, then it becomes easy to say, we're doing that. This is who we need to invest in because it's going to help us get that piece done. And I could say very quickly that I'm at Clemson University now, building the film school, building the production side of the film school. And one of the reasons that we're here now is because, beyond our personal reasons, having spent the time I have with Julia in our relationship and in our careers, I know there's great storytellers down here. I know it. I know there's great talent down here. And how that talent and storytelling connects with the outer world and connects with other things, we'll figure out. But I know what's in LA already, and it's so exciting to be here where there are so many voices and so much talent. And I think Julia is a great example of how to go from this literally dirt to these kind of magical places.
So number one, in comedy, you must know your voice, right? Of course, that's true in drama as well, but I think it's specifically true in comedy, right? What is your brand of comedy? Number two, how to approach comedy. Know your craft. okay? And that seems so simple. But what I mean by know your craft is know the craft of the medium of comedy in which you are creating, of which there are many, okay? With knowing the medium, that also indicates tone. And knowing how to work in the medium, in the correct tone, is key to your success. And it is shocking to me how many young writers I have come across who actually are like, I want to write on a sitcom, but they have no idea how to format a sitcom script. So, so you have to learn your craft, okay? Let's think about that for a second. Tone, medium, craft. If you are, say you're like, I want to create a comedy. Well, what are you doing, right? So is your tone broad? If your tone is broad and you know you're a big, broad comedy writer and you're good at broad comedy, then you're going to probably want to write, create, or pursue jobs in the field of sitcoms or in the field of musical theater, right? Because those are going to be your broadest forms of comedy generally. That's in general, right? But then even within those broad comedy sitcoms and musical theater, especially sitcoms, you're getting into all of your subgenres, right? And they're different. Is it a broad sitcom that's family driven, like the Leanne Morgan Show, or Everybody Loves Raymond, or the show I worked on, Country Comfort, or is it a observational driven, which is more like Seinfeld, or is it romantic driven? Like what? There's so many subgenres. So it's not enough to just say, I want to write a sitcom. Well, what genre of sitcom are you writing, right? Then how is that formatted? What do? If you're writing sitcoms, you have to know that you're going to be writing a teaser. You're going to be writing 3 acts. You're going to be writing probably a tag at the end. You're going to have to create a situational comedy that's going to be able to sustain itself over time. You're going to have to figure out how to storytell in 20 minutes, essentially, because most of it's commercials, right? You're going to have to learn to pack all that story in that amount of time and work in a writer's room, right? That's it, the whole art in of itself. Or what's another medium? Let's say you're working in digital comedy. Well, what are you doing in digital comedy, right? Are you doing what I did initially and just piggybacking on a meme? Well, then that's going to be a certain tone because you're going to have to be true to that meme. Or do you want to do stand-up and use your digital platform to promote your stand-up? Or are you a sketch character person, right? Then that's more what I call talking head kind of comedy. Are you a person who's going out there and talking to your audience every day in that sort of kind of stand-up way and then using that same sort of tone, doing stand-up comedy? Maybe, right? But know your tone, because you can't build an audience if the audience doesn't know what to come back and expect every week, right? Are you want to be an influencer? Is that what you want to do? Well, then you have to learn how to balance doing creative stuff with selling stuff if you're trying to make your living there. Are you trying to create comedy that's in the digital world that's more scripted, right? Maybe you are. If you're on YouTube, you're going to be creating then sort of short, more web series based storytelling comedy. Or are you creating on Instagram, TikTok, or shorts in YouTube? Now you're creating vertical based comedy. All of this has tone and format that has to be carefully considered. There's other forms of comedy.
Well, I mean, we haven't even talked about movies.
Yeah, we
right?
haven't got movies.
And
or single cam.
and in television, right? There's single cam, there's multicam.
Yeah.
And we don't just reference these as genres, right? We're not just sort of listing. These are paths.
Mm-hmm.
It's very rare that a single camera comedy writer comes off, say, a Brooklyn Nine-Nine or a Curb Your Enthusiasm and gets hired by Chuck Lorre on 2.5 Men. Multicam is its own lane, it's its own business, all right? So when you achieve a certain level of success or notoriety, you can spread your wings a lot easier, right? If Aaron Sorkin wanted to write a children's book today, okay, he can. He's freaking Aaron Sorkin. But you got to get there. And so the easiest way, or at least a way that increases your probability of getting there, like Julia said, is figuring out your tone, figuring out your craft, what medium do you want to create in, and then lean into it consistently, especially if you're starting out, okay? Because if I read a script of yours that's funny, that's a great comedy, and I say, well, what else do you have? And it's a movie, and then you hand me a sitcom, I'm like, okay, she knows how to do a couple different genres, but I don't know what to do with two different things. But if you're like, here's my next comedy movie, and here's another comedy movie, I'm like, she writes comedy. Maybe we'll develop one of those, or maybe I'll hire her to write something, or maybe, the maybes can extrapolate. But when you're starting out especially, or you're building your brand, kind of picking a lane that you feel good about and becoming a master of it, and finding an audience, finding eyeballs, finding some success, whatever that is going to help you grow. And as I said earlier, help people like me help you, so that we know who we're working with. And then in success, you can do anything. Success is wonderful. You can try a million different things. But look, and there's no rules, right? Otherwise, we'd all be doing Visit the Beverly Hills Hotel already. We're tired, right? We all have paths we're growing on. But to increase your probabilities, finding a lane, finding a voice, and really mastering a certain type of craft within the comedy genre, if you're doing comedy, is a really great thing to focus on for a chapter.
Yes. And again, knowing that craft, knowing your medium, knowing the tone of that medium. I mentioned theater and sitcoms, but there's single cam comedy. And the thing about single cam comedy, it's very much like writing feature comedy as far as tone goes. But again, you have to know the tone of what you're doing, because there's different subgenres of single cam, right? Are you doing like a naturalistic kind of character-driven single cam like Hacks, right? Or are you doing some sort of cringe comedy like Curb Your Enthusiasm? What are you doing, right? Because I can tell you this, if you do not know your medium and you do not know your tone and you do not stick to that tone and all the laws within it, you will not find success. You cannot start writing something in this tone and then decide midway through, oh, but this scene would be so funny like this. You have no tone that the audience can feel comfortable sitting there. Audiences have to feel comfortable watching comedy. The minute they feel uncomfortable, unless it's super cringe comedy and that's what you're going for, you have a problem. You have a problem.
But even the discomfort is a consistency.
Yeah.
Right? South Park is consistently what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't like it, don't watch it. If you like it, you get it every time. And so it's also a thing about comedy. Again, there are broad comedies, right? Generally speaking, everybody loves shows like Everybody Loves Raymond or certain broad things. And that's wonderful if you can do those things. Those, I guess, kind of called 4-quadrant things, every age, every type of person. But for the most part, you're trying to capture a lane. Not everybody has to watch South Park. Enough people have to watch it that it, warrants the success that it has. The same with a show like Curb. Not everybody loves Curb Your Enthusiasm. People that love it, can't wait to watch it again. They're hungry for it, and every time they come back, they get some experience. Oh, Rhodes?
Yeah, do you go so far to turn down work outside the producer or actor to stay in your lane?
I would.
I am not in the business of turning down work. Ever. Not in show business. But I don't say yes to things that I don't think I'll be successful at, right? I don't just say yes to anything. I might say yes to something that makes me scared and uncomfortable. Like, that's going to be challenging, right? I haven't done that before. But there must be some element in there that I feel like I have the talent to deliver. Otherwise, I'm wasting that person's time and that person's never going to employ me again. And the experience of that person, that producer working with me is going to be a nightmare. And they're going to make sure everybody that they know knows that. So it doesn't serve me to just do anything.
But the concept of turning down work itself dictates that somebody's offered you something, right? You can't turn something down you're not offered. I've tried. And no, but you can't. And so that means that that's a different kind of decision. Can I come, I'll use this concept. I have a friend who's a showrunner. He runs writers' rooms, came up, young writer, worked till he got his opportunity. The last show that he was the showrunner on was a show on Freeform called Grownish, which was a spin-off of the Blackish series. And Craig always talks about being a band leader. And when he's hiring people to come into the room, can they sit in his band? You know, you might be a great drummer. Can you play drums in this comedy? Can you do those things? But if he offered a job to someone that maybe wasn't necessarily a traditional comedy writer, he has a reason for offering that to someone because he knows what he's doing. And if they say yes, they can, again, find their way within it. As Julia said, find your footing in it. That's if you're offered work. If you're offered money to go make something, take it, make it. You know, don't be that precious. But if you're cultivating your brand, if you're cultivating your voice, be thoughtful to not, I think, certainly at the beginning, try to be all things to all people. You don't need to make a really successful. Jason Blum didn't make a horror movie and then say, now I'm going to go make a family comedy, right? He built Blumhouse. He's like, I am in my lane and we're going to dominate. And you can't dominate in 10 different things.
Right. And also it's very different. We've talked a lot about television, you know, different categories there in comedy. And then there's features, right? And writing a feature comedy is, which I've done, I kind of prefer writing in features, just so you know. But there's something, not everybody likes that. You know, it's very isolating to be a feature writer. And you don't get the same feedback with the comedy. You have to have a different kind of talent there to work as a feature writer in comedy than you do in writers' rooms. You have to have a different kind of thick skin to work in a comedy room than you have to have as a feature writer. And if those are things that you're interested in talking about, just the experiences of that, I'm happy to answer any questions. But I do want to move forward with the points. But again, to wrap that up, know your voice, because your voice is your brand, right? And then know the craft of the medium in which you are creating. And within that medium, you must know your tone, okay? That's really, really important. Then the third thing I think when you go to approach comedy, and I'm going to try to talk to you a little bit about this both as a writer and an actor, because they're kind of different, a little bit different. Some things cross over and certainly overlap. But it's how do you find the funny, right? People are like, well, how do you make it funny? How do you make it funny? And I will tell you this. I can only speak to my process, and I can only speak about my experiences working with some brilliant comedy writers and directors. I've been very fortunate to be under many of their wings, and I've learned a lot, and it's my pleasure to share with you. So I'll just share my process, and I will say this, when I'm going to create a comedy concept, I don't care what medium I'm working in, whether I'm doing a spec script, whether I'm on a job, whether I'm trying to get a job, whether I'm making a YouTube video. The first thing is first. I am not thinking about jokes at all. The first thing I am thinking about is what is my premise? And is my premise funny enough to sustain itself over this medium, right? So my popular series on my Southern Women channel is called Stuff Southern Women Say, right? And when I first did one, someone was like, well, you can't keep doing that forever. It is 2025. I did the first video in 2012. I am still making those videos because there is an endless amount of ridiculous things that Southern women say. It never ends, right? It never ends. That is a sustainable concept. It is simple. If you do not like it and you do not want to watch it and you are bored with me, don't go to my YouTube channel. I do not care, right? But if that entertains you, then fine. It is an easy thing for me to keep feeding, right? If I wanted to do, I wanted to do something scripted on my YouTube channel, I did a little something called The Blessers, right? And it's just this little idea about how many different funny ways can you use the word bless in 3 minutes? Like bless your heart, and oh Lord bless, and bless it all, and I hope you have a blessed day, and I just do these little sketches, right? That can't sustain itself for 5 minutes. I'm going to shoot myself in the head. Nobody wants to watch that. But in 2 to 3 minute bites, it works, right? So know your premise, right? So is your premise gonna work for this entire sitcom script or this entire 35-page single cam script? Or is your premise going to be funny enough to last 110 pages for a feature? But knowing your premise is number one, and finding a comedic premise that works.
In that lane, I've heard from many people, and then myself use this a lot, is knowing the difference, let's just say in one little example, between a segment and a show, right? It's a big difference. You can see, again, 2-3 minutes, funny stuff. Not every, if you like it or not, whatever, but not every Saturday Night Live sketch becomes a movie. Can it sustain? And you need to either learn or kind of use your judgment and be honest with yourself. Am I doing something that's a little one note and I'm trying to play 2 notes with it? Or am I going to play the best 1 note in the world? And then I'm going to figure out, this idea is the symphony I can play a lot of notes in.
Yeah, so number 1's premise. Number 2, the second thing I start thinking about when creating, and I'm going to talk a little bit more in my feature brain and in my television brain right now than digital brain, is characters. Okay? The next thing I think about is characters. Who are my characters? Because here's the thing about comedy. So much of your comedy is created simply by creating the right character mix. If you create the right character mix, you have the right ingredients for your soup to be funny. If you do not create the right character mix, you have no conflict. And comedy arises from conflict. Look at Friends, right? You got Joey who's the clown, and Rachel who's looking for love, and Lisa Kudrow's character who's the dumb enthusiast. And it's the mix of all these people that creates comedy. Same is true of features. Same is true in single cam. So that's what I think about. I spend a lot of time creating my characters. Who are my main characters, right? And who are the other characters around them? And if you get that, spend enough time there, then you're ready to move on to the next thing. The next thing for me is I start to think about who are my main characters, or what is their overall objective, right? And while that seems simple, that's not so simple in comedy, right? Because especially if it's a sitcom, is that overall objective? If you're on network, you've got to reach that overall objective in those 20 pages. If you're on a streaming sitcom or streaming single cam, you might be in the cliffhanger comedy business where these things are going over time. It might be, what does that character want over the whole series, and how are you building that objective over the whole series, not just the episode, right? And then you also have to think about, even in digital, even with my silly little stuff Southern women say, each of us is a different kind of archetype. Each one of us is very different. I've got a mom, I got a young hot one, I kind of play the redneck character. Your character mix is really, really important. And what those characters want is everything. It should be crystal clear to you what every single character wants. Okay? Because if it's not crystal clear to you, then you have no map for the audience. And you have no map to create your comedy once you start writing scenes. And within those objectives, what are the stakes? Stakes are everything in comedy. Your comedy lives or dies by the stakes, right? If
Well, I'll use one. And stakes are real,
yes.
right? That's the thing about comedy that a lot of people miss, is they're trying to create a funny kind of stake almost, right? So take one of the goofier, sillier movies that we see maybe every year on TV, Will Ferrell's Elf, right? Elf is a pretty goofy movie, and if you think about it on a surface level, it's a pretty goofy movie. But it's a movie about a young boy who's trying to find his father, whose father abandoned him, and his father wants nothing to do with him, and they are at conflict. That sounds a little serious. Put him in green costumes and from the North Pole and get Will Ferrell and James Caan, and you have one of the greatest comedies ever. But the stakes are real for the characters. Very important.
Sam is so right. The stakes will create your comedy. They absolutely will. And as an actor, I'll speak to that in a moment as well. But as a writer, you have to have big stakes. And as I've developed with really brilliant comedy directors, a director named Brian Gordon taught me something. Brian is a big director.
He directed the pilot of Curb Your Enthusiasm.
And directed many, many episodes of The Office. His daughter is Molly Gordon. Got it. But who is an actress, you might know her from The Bear. But Brian said to me something that was so smart. We were working on a script together. He was attached to something I was working on at one point. And he said, Julia, honey, if you want to up the stakes, up the stakes. And I understood what he meant. It's like I was afraid to go too big. But he's like, no, go for it. Up the stakes. Take your imagination to the craziest place in the world for your stakes. And that will help you create the comedy. I want to move forward because I'm getting, I'm getting signs. Then what are your obstacles, right? You have to figure out what the obstacles are. You have to figure for all those goals that your characters want. You have to then figure out what all of those different characters and story arcs are. And they all should have some sort of through line. You have to, it's hard, especially if you're working in ensemble comedy, to serve all those different stories, but you have to fully draw your characters. Then I go to scripting my rough draft. When I start scripting that rough draft, that's when I start working on scenes and rhythm and finding jokes. And if I've done all the work before that, the comedy begins to reveal itself organically, right? After I've written that first draft and I've had people read it, or the showrunners read it, or who the agents or table reads, which I highly recommend in comedy. There's no better way to know whether or not your comedy's working than do a table read. If they don't laugh in the room, they will not laugh in the theater.
When you hear it, you know it.
Yes.
Because I know we are time challenged, but I will say, and really take this with you, professional comedy is not an inside joke.
No.
It is an outside joke.
Mm-hmm.
And if it ain't if people in the room aren't laughing, get a better joke.
That's
if your
right.
premise, your stakes, your characters hold, the jokes will come a mile a minute.
Then after I do my, I write my rough draft, I begin polishing them. I now start polishing, and it is the polish phase that I really start honing in my comedy. And I polish. And when I start honing in the comedy, it's not just the dialogue. It's not just the rhythm of the scenes. It's not just the circumstances. It's the whole read of the script. The action lines need to be funny. They need to be concise and funny, right? Or am I coming into, is the scene dragging on? I got to come in. I got to get out. Does the scene have the appropriate blow if it's supposed to have a blow? Am I in sitcom? Am I in feature? What am I doing, right? But you have to begin then polishing. The polishing of the comedy is sort of what I do last. And I continue to do that. And as an actor, you have to know that, right? As an actor, you kind of work the same way. You have to know your tone. What show am I auditioning for? What I've been hired for. You have to know your voice, and not really your voice. You have to know your character's voice by doing lots of backstory and knowing who you are and knowing the writer's voice. In comedy, if you're an actor, I will say this. Nobody cares about you rewriting their lines. If you are auditioning for a comedy and you do not say precisely what is on the page, you will not be invited back. to audition for any other comedies. That is called death. Death in comedy. Okay?
When you are creating for yourself, you can say funny things. When you are working for someone else, you say their things funny.
That's right. You have to learn.
Big difference.
Huge difference. And if you are working, let's say, and I have worked and been hired to work. I also went through the entire Second City improv program, so I'm also well-versed in improv. The movie I just directed, I wrote it as an improv scripted hybrid because I was looking for an improv element. That's a very different world. However, those improvs were all discovered in a rehearsal process. And then I kept certain things and lost certain things. And the actors were still following my beats, and they were still working within the improv structure. I said, don't do that again. I don't like that. That's not funny. You think that's funny. I understand that. It's not, okay? Instead, we're going to do this. And that is funny. Keep that every time, right? So, but as an actor, you really have to understand. You have to know your character. You have to know the voice and the tone of which you're working. Is it broad? Is it not? Is it natural? What is it? And you're not worrying about jokes. You're playing it real. Play comedy real. The more real and serious you play the comedy, the funnier it is. In theater, I will tell you this in comedy. In theater and sitcoms, here's your number one challenge once you get the job, right? The number one challenge is those are mediums that are rehearsed and rehearsed within an inch of their lives. You stand on this number at this time, so this light hits you, and in sitcoms, that camera's prepared for you. You have to do it the exact same way every time. Do not deviate. Yet, keep it fresh. Don't be stale, right? How do you do that? Talent. It takes talent. And on some level, comedy requires a bit of God-given talent and rhythm and timing, right?
And then training and working.
Yes, but you know, that is the number one difficult thing I would say in theater and in sitcoms. In single cams and in features, it's a different challenge as an actor. In single cams and features, yes, there may or may not be a rehearsal process. There will probably definitely be table reads, which will be helpful, right? But what there will not be is any funny takes if you come in with a rehearsed plan. That is death to comedy when you are working in the single cam or feature world. What you want to come in with is be very prepared. Know the scene inside out. Know how to do it exactly like it's written. But not the same way every time it's written. You have to be open to discovering the comedy. Single cams and features in comedy are definitely a medium of discovery. And most of the funniest things that end up on screen after the edit process, which in and of itself could be a whole workshop on editing comedy and directing comedy. Most of the things that I find really work are the things that the actor discovered in that moment. It's not anything that they did in the first take or the second take. It's something that they just got out of. Okay, now that they got that out, now that you got your idea out, let's get out there and figure out really what we can discover. And it takes a certain kind of brave spirit to do that.
Speaking of bravery, and this will kind of be our last point, is you got to be brave and you got to have courage. And you cannot in any way, shape, or form be afraid to fail.
That's right.
Don't freaking worry about it. Try it. Do it. What's the worst thing that can happen, right? It is about trying. I heard a 10-year-old kid was interviewed. He became the youngest grand chess master ever. And I saw this segment on him. And they said, well, you're 10 years old. You're playing this thing at this high level. How do you handle losing? And I learned so much from him in one moment. He said, I don't know. I've never lost. I only learn, right? He wasn't afraid to fail because that's what made him better. So with everything we're saying, The way to discover your voice, discover your talent, discover your tone, discover your lane is to try. Make and try. Let's do a few questions with the time we have.
Yeah, what role does creating the picture in your comedy scripts play? You're talking a lot about the technicality of telling the story and the actual script itself, but in terms of creating the pictures with the script, how does that play in how you craft the comedy script?
What do you mean by pictures?
Well, it's a visual medium, and so I understand the rhythm and the writing and the timing of writing jokes, but in terms of it, there's pictures with the comedy as well. I mean, part of what makes Elf funny, for example, is you have a 6'4" guy in a green suit with a pointy hat.
Right.
And all those visuals that go with it. I haven't heard you guys speak much about the visuals of what you're writing.
Well, I will say this. I think that's sort of 2 points. Number one, some of that's in directing, right? So how are you staging the scene? How are you casting it, right? So the casting is part of your comedy. That's part of your visual comedy. Who are you casting? Number two, how are you directing the scenes, right? For example, there's a scene where I just did the feature I did, and I'm playing a boss, and I'm just berating the person that I'm working for. So I staged it so that I'm higher than they are on camera. So they look even smaller, even more pathetic, so it's just a physical comedy beat. But a lot
That's not
of...
something that you would necessarily write into your script.
I would not say, maybe I would. I was going to say that. So on the one hand, it might be the director is sort of storyboarding what things look like on some level and blocking. So that's one level. But on the other level, the best comedy writers I know say, if you want your comedy to be funny, you better start directing it when you write it. I direct the comedy on the page. I write it. So I'm writing the visual comedy. They walk in a room and the sign, there's a huge sign that says this, and he walks by, and then there's this sitting there, and there's this person there. I'm writing it. You're writing the visual cues if you're a really good comedy writer. So that the director is just servicing the writer's comedic vision. So yes, a lot of those visuals are written.
I guess if I had to distill from my point of view down very quickly, 2 things. Physical comedy, shoot it a little wider so we can see the physical comedy. Jokes, eyeballs. It's hard to make you laugh like this.
That's right. You're never going to land.
I got a better shot like this. So
right.
I think you want to see eyes of your characters when they're delivering really funny lines. And obviously, if you're doing funny gags, keep them in the frame.
Yeah.
So if there's somebody dragging somebody out of something, you got to go wide enough to see the drag.
Exactly.
I know that sounds simple, but a lot of people kind of don't think through the simple thing of what does the joke dictate, and then how am I going to shoot the joke so the audience can experience the joke?
That's right.
And jokes and eyeballs are peas and carrots.
When you're talking about directing as you write, do you have this cork board with the visuals and you're putting all those visuals up there and you're I'm trying to imagine practically what you're talking about.
Right. I think
finish this process.
I think I am not a person that does a lot of corkboarding. Yeah. I have a lot of writer friends that their whole room is just corkboards. Yeah. Okay. I paste things on the wall. It's just my outline. So that I'm constantly looking at the outline, and I learned that in writers' rooms. That's how we're working in writers' rooms. Some of the bigger shows, like This Is Us, the whole timeline was all the way around the room at all times, right? And writers' rooms, you keep those whole things out. So for me, it's more about my timeline and my story sequence. I'm directing on the page, angle on, angle on this person. They're doing this over here. That's a director, right? So screenwriting school will say, no, don't direct. Your job is to write. But all the best comedy writers I have worked with and worked for have said to me, no. Direct that right on the page. Because if you don't, God knows what the director will do. If you're lucky enough to direct your own comedy, you don't have to do it as much. But if you're handing your script over to another director and you lose all the power, they only have what you've written on the page.
And you
so
want,
make it crystal clear.
that's right. And paint the picture. I think that's kind of what you were asking. Paint the picture. Meaning, if, you know, character X is sitting at the cafeteria and two people are behind them sneering at them, well then make sure you bring the sneer to life. Don't just have extras walking in the background. It's like, no, it said here, people sneering. Because we now know that they've embarrassed themselves and people are gossiping about them or whatever. It should all be on the page that paints the picture of what happens to the characters to get them over their hurdles through their motivations towards their goals.
And I'm even doing that when I'm creating characters, when I introduce the character, and I'm putting in parentheses, maybe 1 or 2 words introducing that character. Those 2 words are funny, and those 2 words are crystal clear. So you immediately visualize who you're reading. You have to remember, if you're trying to sell a script, that whole script has got to be funny from beginning to end. The whole read has to be funny. Try to figure out how to make it funny from the title page, right? You have to figure that out. And don't be afraid to put your vision on the page. No one knows what's in your head. You have to make it crystal clear.
That's right. And laughter's involuntary, right? So it happens or it doesn't. And that's why you table read and workshop. I think we're out of time, but we can gather and happy to answer any questions.
I'm happy to answer any question. I'll be here all weekend.
Yeah. But thank you so much for
Thank
the
y'all so
time.
much.
It was great to be here. We're excited to see movies and see all the great talent and awesome stuff happen here at Trans.
Yes, and good luck to you. I hope you all have very, very funny careers.